Hello, this is Amy from Motif Music Studios, and I am here live today on a Friday. I typically come online and interview composers in a series called Coffee with Composers. And lately, I've been changing it up and also doing a Coffee with Creative series that's help for piano teachers. So if you're here as a piano teacher and fellow music educator, or you're just curious about what piano teachers are brainstorming about, I hope you are here and find some value in what we're going to talk about. This is our very first time to do a live Q&A, so I feel like we're just going to dive into topics before the audience gets here that might be relevant to you as a piano teacher. And I was reminded about how valuable that is lately as I was interviewed for a couple podcasts, and they asked such great questions about business and how we got started. So we're going to dive into policies as a piano teacher and maybe some teaching struggles you have. I see some of you are joining us live, which is super exciting. So if you have questions that you would like to ask, today is your day. Or if you have some pain points in your studio that you say, oh, I wish I could brainstorm this out with some fellow colleagues, we can do that together today. So thanks for being here. So we're going to dive right in. If questions come in, I will go straight to those, but I thought I'd give you guys a sneak peek of some policies that we have at Motif Music Studios. If you haven't met us yet, my name's Amy. My husband Jeff and I started a music school in 2010 with the vision of making it a collaborative teaching studio, and it became a vibrant biome of fellow colleagues and music educators that I really admired, and from all different teaching experiences. So I feel like there's lots of things we can learn from that. So I'm just going to check. Yay, Ashley, nice to have you here. And I was reflecting so much on the things we talked about recently, too. So some of our policies at Motif are ones that we built with the idea of how can we bring the most value to our clients while also serving the needs of our teachers. And I think that's unique in a multi-studio environment. Is sometimes we get caught up on like we want to make our clients happy. And if you're piano students of ours that are listening in today, I love it. I always speak positively about the people that we work with. And so when we shaped our policies, we thought, how can we best serve our audience, our students, by preserving the needs of our teachers? So I'd love to hear in the comments if you have specific policies that you're always thinking about, like, oh, how can I do that better? And we'll focus on those. But if not, we'll just dive in. So we talked about attendance first, and we have a stricter attendance policy. So we say for students to enjoy their lessons and progress to their best of their abilities, they'll benefit by regular attendance of lessons. So just kind of throwing that out to the clientele that to make progress, we want to see you at your lessons. I also say to my students quite often that lessons are a guilt-free zone. So I love making sure that they feel welcome at lessons, and that if their week has gone sideways and they haven't practiced, there's always value in just showing up at the lesson, and that's what teachers are there for. So we really emphasize that early on. We also use the phrase, their lesson time is reserved especially for them throughout the music year, and lessons missed will not be refunded or made up. And I know that's like, whoa. So let me know in the comments if you have a policy like that where you reserve the time for each individual student, or if you have more flexibility. And again, it has to be something that serves you as a teacher. For us in a multi-studio school where we had 7 to 12 teachers, we thought, wow, we want to keep this a consistent job for teachers. And what we saw in our industry was that there was lots of like, if you give 24-hour notice, you don't have to pay. And I thought, well, how am I going to pay my beautiful, amazing teachers that just reserve their time? And how am I going to pay them a steady job if they can't keep steady expected hours? So we really work that into our culture at the school. And I also said tuition is based on those lesson times being reserved for the full year. Any lessons missed by your instructor for sickness or other reasons will be made up. So again, we're not saying that teachers can just go AWOL. We're going to have some policies surrounding that. But then we get to the fun part, because we do have some ways of honoring our clientele and making sure that they maximize the value of their lessons. So one of those things is we do have something called flex days for our instructor. So when we figure out our policies at the beginning of the year, we add some flex days that we don't charge our clients for. So if a teacher needs to take a sunny day off, we always we look at how can we provide something to our teachers to keep them healthy physically and emotionally. So if they need a day off, there's a certain number of each day that they can take off without having to make up lessons. It can be for any reason at all. I always tell them, you can be at the beach. Your students can see you at the beach and go, hello, Mrs. So-and-so, and it's going to be okay. So then the next thing we do is we do have a swap list at Motif, and we really stay away from the word makeup lesson. And so what our policy is that if we do get notice about a student that's going to miss, or maybe they're sick and just hours before they're really sick and need to be picked up from school, or maybe they have a dance recital or something, we actually have a little running swap list that if a cancellation comes up in their own teacher's schedule, so say 4 o'clock on Thursday, I hear about a student that will be missing, I'll look through my list and go, oh, that time might actually work for this student. That keeps the teacher's schedule the same so that they're not coming in Saturday morning or working 2 extra weeks in the summer, ways that I've done it before, keeps it consistent for them. And yet students get to have the option of a swap lesson if they like. So I love that Michelle is here. Hi, Michelle. Good to see you. And you say it's a great policy. I offer a video lesson using the student lesson time in the event they cannot come in person or online. Fantastic. I love that because it adds value to your students and it respects your own time, because that's time that you can do that. Recently, I heard the interview with Samantha Coates on Amy Chaplin's podcast, I believe. And she mentioned the great idea too to remind students, hey, if you submit a video of you playing before your missed lesson, then I'll give you some personalized feedback. And I thought, I love those ways too of involving families in those decisions, because it gives them ownership. And then if they're like, oh, you know what, that's okay, I don't need that, then the teacher can rest during that time. As a multi-studio teacher owner, we also take in perspective the fact that some weeks our teachers might be preparing for festivals or exams. They might be already teaching outside those hours. So if I see a teacher who's starting to seem kind of frazzled, teachers, if you're listening, you'll know this about us, that I'll intentionally not offer swap times to clients, because I know they're already working really hard. And if they get those little minuscule breaks in their day, they're going to need them to feel prepared for the challenges coming up. Or maybe they're working with an advanced student that has some extra demanding repertoire and they can use that time to practice. Or they just will go get a coffee. Let's be real, lots of being a teacher happens outside those lines. So that was lots about our attendance policy. I'm speaking really fast and lively today. I've only had one coffee, I promise. But I'd love to hear from you. What are some Well, first, let's start with things that you're celebrating in your studio. What is going really well for you in your teaching today? So I love that we can go, okay, this is actually really working for me. So if you have something that is working well for you, free to drop that in the comments. Or if you have a topic about teaching that you'd love to hear what we're doing on this side, or we can brainstorm in the comments, then you go for that. So this is, then we'll dive into solutions next. And so I love that we can think about things to celebrate. For me, I'm really celebrating that this year has gone really smooth. I have all only online students for me, and I feel like there's just been a really nice ebb and flow of progress, and then we've had some times that have taken, like, little less practice time, but then they've really renewed their enthusiasm towards the end of the season. For us, we wrap up on the 26th of June, so that's always nice to go, "Okay, we did it," like, people are leaping in again. So next, I don't like always focusing on pain points in a studio, but sometimes focusing on discomfort or realizing that something is uncomfortable is a perfect time to start brainstorming solutions. So I'll give you an example. Years ago, we were printing those beautiful recital programs for families, but we had like 12 teachers and over 200 students. And we were finding that the timeline where we were getting the information and able to get it printed on time was so tight for us. So I was working way late in the night. I really love making these really carefully crafted programs and taking into consider, like, an awkward teen student not being right after a tiny little prodigy. Like, I would always like really craft these groups. So it was something I love to do, but I realized that I wasn't getting the information no matter how hard we tried, no matter how many sign up lists there were or email communication. We just weren't getting all the data we needed on time for it not to be an all night thing. And then once you got it, you would find changes. A parent would say, "Oh, we so badly want to do this, but we really need to get little Johnny to his soccer. Can we start first or can we go at the end?" And we love making things work for families, but I realized that model of a printed program wasn't working for us. So we started to do a PowerPoint presentation for our program, which worked brilliantly. So let me know if you're here. If you do recitals, do you do a printed program still, or are you doing PowerPoint, or do you have some other brilliant idea? I'd love to hear it. So this year, a new pain point arose because the venue we rent needs to have somebody else manage the PowerPoint. So that's new to us. We usually come with our team and say, "We're ready to go. We want to do this. We're prepared." But that's fine. We can honor that. But they needed the PowerPoint submitted on the Thursday. And again, I know our families, I know our teachers, and even though they were choosing recital pieces 6 weeks ago, if I submit it on a Thursday morning, I can guarantee that it won't be accurate and that at the last minute, I'll be like, "Oh, now that person's sick and they can't come and this person's moved." And all the work of doing the PowerPoint and doing the group isn't gonna be accurate if I submit it early. So yeah, and I love Lisa here says she's still doing printed programs, which is brilliant. If that's working in your studio and you've got more control being a single, like a solopreneur, then that can still work well. So for us, though, I realized that it's not serving us. It's a bigger studio. Families are just doing the best they can. And again, I try to keep that in mind when I find a pain point. I try not to lean into feeling frustrated, like, "Why can't we get this information early?" And I instead try to go, "Okay, it's a sign of overwhelm. Families are overbooked and overwhelmed." So this year, we're going to do it different. I'm going to set up how many approximate students we have into groups. And as they come in the door, they're going to get a little laminated number and they can actually choose if they want to be midway, beginning, or end. And we're going to do it that way. And that's hard for me because it kind of is like a loss of control, right? And maybe I have some subtle control techniques. Anyways, so I love that you're dropping in fresh. Some of you are still here and some dropping in fresh here. We're talking brainstorming for piano studios, whether you're a teacher on your own or whether you're working with multiple teachers like we do here at Motif. To get it started, I've just been going through some of the policies that we have at Motif and how we love them to serve both the client and the teachers that we work with to make it a really rewarding job. So if you're here for the first time, you can say hi, or if you're here returning, make sure to drop in the comments where you're listening from. So the next thing, I'll just go through our list of policies, but if you have a policy that you're like, "Oh, I'm really curious what you guys do at Motif Music Studios," then just let me know in the comments and I'll leap ahead. So, I also there was this book called What Would Happen If Everybody Did, and it was this book as a child that we read, and it's a fabulous book, and I actually when I wrote my policies, I read that book again because I thought about it and thought, a lot of why we do policies isn't for the exceptions. It's actually because if we have a policy that can't be broken by everyone, then it's probably not efficient. I don't know if I phrased that right, so let me try again. So basically, say something like makeup lesson. If just one student in a week needs a makeup lesson, that wouldn't be a big deal. Like, oh, sure, I'll stay late on Thursday. But if you multiply it by how many students you teach, I had 55 students at the time. I thought, wow, I can't do that for 55 people because if everyone changes their time, I'm going to be drowning in makeup lessons. So I put a little note in our staff manual, which is also here, and it says many of our policies have been based on this principle of what would happen if everybody did. Some things that work fine in a home studio may not work well in a group environment. And so we just think of that when we're doing policies. So Michelle says, what a wonderful idea to have families enter and get a number to determine when they perform. That would be a good challenge for us as teachers. I'm a bit of a control freak too, right? I'm like super nervous about it, but I also love that it gives kids some autonomy. I do find like my anxious performers, I usually like have them a certain spot in the lineup, but I feel like if I'm, at the front door with some educators I trust, we can probably kind of guide that process quite efficiently. So this will be a first for our studio, and we've run, I think, around 65 recitals as a collaborative studio, not counting workshops. So we're going to give this a try and I'll let you know how it goes. So that's kind of fun. So the next thing that we have a policy for almost everything because it being a group studio, we really need to cover some. So if there's a topic you want to hear about, let me know. If not, we have a policy that if students arrive late, teachers are happy to teach the remainder of the lesson time, but lessons will still end at the scheduled time. At the end of the day, teachers will wait 15 minutes and then assume the student is absent if they don't show up. So again, it feels like, it just sets a nice guideline for families. Hey, you're still welcome. So I always make sure not to focus on the fact that someone's late. We don't know if their car died or someone was struggling with transition. We're just here to welcome you and say, we're so glad you're here. Let's make music in the time we have together. But it's nice to set that parameter. So I'd love to hear if you have that written down or if you tend to just kind of keep the lesson length the same. We did have some teachers that were used to just giving the time no matter what. And by the end of the day, they were running about an hour behind. So that, again, sometimes those little pain points, when they're magnified, starts to give some clarity. Catch my breath here. So we cover materials and lesson books, and this is actually a good time for me to review this because our policies have changed since we started, but generally our fees do not include lesson books, but I'd love to hear if your fees do. We do charge an administrative fee that used to be separate, but now it's kind of woven in, and that covers some of our studio licensed materials. Like I have the Pro account for Supersonic's piano, and we have Musico. And so those things we do cover, and they're really a great benefit to our clientele. So I love that there. The next thing, we had a very big resource library at Motif, and we started not to catalog it because we found that if you were cataloging it, it took so much time to like check out a book. And I found I always benefited by people returning materials or donating materials. So we had a fairly open one. The only materials I kept back were my Urtext editions. And anyone here will know those Urtext editions are pricey. So I didn't keep them in the lending library. So let's hear from you. Is there a topic you'd like me to dive into, or a pain point in your studio that you're trying to solve? So I'm definitely here to chat about those things with you as well. although I'm happy to keep going. So if you want me to keep going, just say, "Keep going, Amy." We're gonna dive into um, home practice next. And I can talk indefinitely. So, but we won't. We'll keep it snappy here. So my this is something that's changed for me. Home practice, we do highlight it in our policy as for you and your student to look forward to weekly lessons and see steady progress through the year. Daily practice is necessary. So we have that being more of a guideline, except I will say now, mm, I try to tell students that as a equiper of lifelong music learners, I really understand that some weeks will be less practice and some will be more. So I really try to create, again, that welcoming environment to come as you are, because sometimes if the practice becomes a big stress or the student isn't supported at home, maybe they wanted to practice, but they were actually gone at a sibling's dance practices all week. We have some dancers in our community that dance 15 hours a week after school time. So practice is going to be variable. So I just definitely try to encourage that music does need to happen. We address it if a student starts to get really overwhelmed and they can't play anything for a long time, then we go, "Ooh, we've got to figure out something new." So either I change the lesson format that it's come and compose together and improvise together and write music together, or we figure out some solutions for home practice. So there's two different models there. And I see some more comments here. Oh, yay, it's so nice to have you here. Yeah, nice to have you here to chat. We're chatting like studio ideas and policies, and then if there's any questions. So if you have a random question for Amy, you just fire it this way. So I do talk about quality of practice being more than minutes on a timer, and that's in our policy. Setting small goals for each practice time, keeping it positive. I try to inform families like not to make practicing a trade for playtime or time with friends, and trying to schedule practices for a time when a student is more fresh, like a morning practice or something that they don't have to sacrifice their like most desirable activity, because kids and adults are smart. We don't want to do something that's going to like have us sacrificing our most favorite thing, right? And then I have in our policy too to encourage playtime at the piano apart from daily practice, because I found a lot of our families in trying to be like good piano parents, they were saying, that doesn't sound like practice, like kind of interrupting a lot the students and saying, don't, what are you doing? Stop playing. And I realized that it was actually creating students that were kind of trying to explore the keys and make new sounds. And I thought, oh, I want students that have that aspect of creativity so that they can keep exploring. Oh, yeah, this is a great question from Michelle. So, we do have published policies on our website now. Our website is about to be revamped because in the triage of like COVID and online teaching, even though my husband's a computer programmer by profession, the website is the thing that wasn't updated, but it is there. And we also have a welcome letter where I do a really concise policy statement. And one thing too that's changed in our this is my 26th year as a piano teacher, which is super fun. How did that happen? And it's our end of our 13th year with Motif. And I find families are reading less and less in their inboxes. They want like one statement reminders. So actually, remind me to mention that I sometimes send a 9-word email. Thanks to the studio expansion group, she had this little tip to in the summer or different things to have a 9-word email. Oh, that's wonderful, James. Nice to have you here. James is a very prolific composer. I love listening to your music, James, and it's an honor to have you listening in. You can let me know. I haven't asked you as much about your teaching, if you also teach, because I know people don't always compose and teach, but many do. So I'd love to hear that. So that's the 9-word email is coming out of a place of families being so overwhelmed, not always reading the policy. So some of those things actually work their way into that they're posted, that they have it in that welcome letter. but that I also try to word it in our communication like weekly. So if they're like, "Can I have a makeup lesson?" It seems silly because it's semantics, but I'll kind of state like a gentle policy. Although we don't guarantee makeup lessons, we do love seeing you maximize the value of your lesson. So please have the student send us a video of their playing before their missed lesson, and our teacher will be happy to take a peek and give some personalized suggestions. So that's an example of that sandwich where you're upholding your policy and you're reminding them of things they can do to maximize value, or that I'll put them on the swap list if a cancellation spot comes up in your teacher's existing schedule. So again, I might use those phrases. They kind of protect our teachers, and that's been a big part of our role. I would love to hear from you, teachers that are here or other listeners, if you find it easy to set boundaries for yourself or if that feels like a hard job. I know for me, I was already a teacher that was really trying to lean into setting some really clear policies because it didn't come naturally for me because I was a people pleaser. But I also knew that if I wanted to stay employed as a teacher and not go do other things, which I had done, I really needed to find that really gracious way of upholding policy so I wasn't frazzled and couldn't teach anymore, because I could see the writing on the wall that if I just went with what everyone requested of me, I wouldn't last. So I'm thankful to have done that early on and had great teachers that modeled that as well. So the 9-word email came out of that. So our 9-word email often in the summer is to do with re-enrollment, and it says something like, I won't count the words here, but we usually say something like, wanting to add more creativity to your home this year, question mark, let us help. And then it just says, like, email us now or something like that. That was a few too many words, but that's how short we keep it, is just like a little, want this, we can help. And we found such great responses from that because parents weren't trying to read through all the steps they needed. It just started the conversation. And so we do some of those things to just keep families feeling involved and connected. So, this is a question for you in the audience today. If you had to choose one aspect of your teaching, whether it's on the teaching side or the business side, what do you find most challenging? So, I'm super curious to know what areas you're strong in and then what areas would be tougher for you to do. And I'll look over this next little spot here. Yes. Okay. So I know for me, and I'll watch for comments here on this topic. I know for me, one of the tougher ones for me always is that administrative side and getting stuck in the inbox because I'd rather like be preparing repertoire and playing. And recently I was inspired by a quote that said, like, run towards the things that like feed your soul. And I thought, oh, well, that's kind of hard because if I'm running towards things that feed my soul and are life giving, then who's going to answer the emails? And I have had an assistant before, but I don't right now. But then I thought about reframing it. So when I look at, we were getting about the volume of 100 emails a day, and that was feeling overwhelming. But I started to think, I might not love emails, but I do love connecting with people. So I'm starting to reframe that and think, oh, I wonder who I can help in the inbox today. And it's funny how just that reframe helps make that less desirable task really like improve my mindset towards it, because those linear tasks are super tough for me. I would also say my husband handles all the accounting side for Motif and all of those like really detailed tracking. And that is his strength by far, not so much my strength. And so that's a huge relief that I can be in the creative communication zone, and him looking after that really beautifully. So that's just one aspect. So we have a couple other policies surrounding recitals and workshops. We include recitals and workshops in the fees at Motif so that we can add quite a variety. So we've done things like rhythm workshops, we've done composition clubs. Our students actually wrote a whole book of compositions that we self-published for those students one year. a big project of one of our teachers, Julianne, at the time. And we've done sight reading workshops, we've done improvising workshops. So every year we have quite a vast variety. I have about 13 years of lesson plans. So let me know some point if you want me to go through some of those options. Yeah, James understands my pain. So 100 emails a day would drive me crazy. I'm bad about being slow to responding things that I don't enjoy as much. Yeah, isn't that interesting? I find it too. And I think at certain stages of life too, it's either that like dopamine reward of some things that your brain actually just enjoys more. So we desire it more, right? And so I do have some inbox strategies that I use now to get that happening for me. One of them is that I dive in and I answer, like I delete any junk and unsubscribe from anything that I'm really not engaged with. And right away, you can really limit how many you have. And then I have a strategy of working from the bottom first, making sure there's not anything too old. And then I work from the top for anything from that day. And then if I run out of time, I know I've done like the sandwich and kind of worked it in together. So that's something that helps me. So nap time seamstress, I'm sorry I don't know your first name. I'm probably weakest on the business end of things, but I don't want to do electronic things. I'm such a paper and pen person. I do text and watch YouTube though. Yeah, so the business stuff, I know I have this handbook. It's called the Independent Piano Teacher Studio Handbook. Everything you need to know for a successful teaching business. It's by Beth Klingenstein. Anyways, Hal Leonard publishes it. And that one's a really good guide for like someone who's like, oh my goodness, the business side is so hard to set up. And I've got to say that part is hard for a lot of creatives. And that's why actually we started Motif, because we actually took on that role of being that administrative side so that our teachers could really flourish in what they were doing. So that was really fun. So Michelle says, thank you for sharing. I have a business background as well as teaching. So I say teaching is more of my intentional area of focus. Yeah, I love that. So having that balance, right, is so beautiful to have that. And it's always interesting to me which teachers really thrive in that business and side and which are like overwhelmed with the business side. And that's what's really slowing them down. The other thing when putting together policies sound so rigid, but we actually did a beautiful thing that we talked about core values. And we did this with our whole team alongside a coach, Liz Wooten, her name is, from Human Nature Development. And we did a whole day workshop with our teachers with her, and we determined what our core values as a business actually were. And so we chose 4 words. We chose nurture, individuality, excellence, and community as our 4 focus words for Motif. And what that did for us when we were doing policies, when we were figuring out what opportunities lined up with this, is we would always draw it back. Does it fit into one of our core values? So I find if you're creative, like Naptime Seamstress, that maybe the business stuff doesn't resonate as much. Sometimes, like looking at the core values of who you are, what you do best, then when another opportunity comes up or something that challenges, like, oh, should I be doing that? I feel worn out or I feel frazzled. You can like bring it to your core values and use that as a guideline. And that helped me again because I'm very much of a pleaser. So I would say, oh, okay, does this nurture? And we had it in the context of that we would nurture students in our care, and also that I would nurture teachers in my care. And then I started to realize, yeah, it also has to be something that nurtures us as business owners. So it's okay to set a boundary if it's not fulfilling that. So that was something we did that was super, super life-giving for us when it comes to policies and shaping things. So we have a whole other topic, is that we have a full staff manual policy and it's 8 pages long. We won't go into that today, but I just love chatting some of these nitty gritty details. Hi, Karen. That's wonderful. But in this, yeah, yes, I'm sure you get a lot of that being a Karen. Well, I can tell you that when you're being your beautiful self, that is wonderful. So we will take that as a very positive name today here in the live stream. So Just a last question for you is what's one way you'd like to grow as a piano teacher this year? So when I decided to go live in a more Q&A style or policy sort of thing, I thought, what's an area that we want to grow in? And again, thinking of that, it might not be an answer you have right away, but maybe that's when you start to think like, oh, what's an area I'd like to grow in? And then another question that comes to mind is what's an area you'd like to rest in? So sometimes you have like an area of strength, but you also need rest. So something that you can just glide into this year, like, hey, I do this well, and I'm just going to rest into this aspect of teaching. So those are just some little question prompts. And I had a couple more. The last thing I had is we could just in the chat pop down some different jobs we have as teachers, and that might help me for future live streams. Is what aspects as a composer, even if you're here still, James, or a teacher, are you fulfilling? So that's something I did alongside the business coach too, was what seats in your business are you filling? So I'll pop some of them in here today. I think we are always like a manager of ourselves or of others when we're teaching because you're managing families, you're managing your own schedule, you're at an administrative assistant, administrative assistant. Oh, that's neat. So James here says, actually mainly teach college courses now, but years ago had around 45 students a week. Now just an occasional student. Oh, that's neat. And that's so cool to be at the college level too, and whole new challenges, right? Working with those different aspects. That's neat. Michelle says a growth area. I'm taking some more lessons for personal growth. Online teachers are plentiful and it works so well to take lessons as a teacher too. Yeah, I love that that's really opened up further development as an instructor and as a musician, right? Because we can grow. I know I have some improv courses from Bradley Sowash on my radar, and I just am so excited about those opportunities of studying in different places. So that's really neat. Um, Oh, yeah. So James says, composing, I try to finish something every day and publish. Wow, that's a huge task. But I can see from your body of work that that's something that you do because you don't have that many published pieces. And I know your Spotify community is huge too. You don't get that by waiting. And interestingly enough, another prolific composer, Christopher Norton, that's been his strategy too, is just that daily get up, start a piece and finish it and publish it. That's really neat. James says things like this years ago were not available. So great, you and others. Yeah, it really is opening doors, right? And I think also a lot of musicians are solopreneurs, like they're running that business side alone. And so sometimes that can be so isolating to go, wow, I need another business mind to help me figure out either the business side or the teaching side. So I think being online, we all can collaborate and communicate a little with a bit more ease. So I know I felt very encouraged by the types of ideas I see online and in some of the Facebook groups, like the Art of Piano Pedagogy is a great one with lots of themes and ideas that are really tangible for educators. Although I'll warn that I'm someone who can get very overwhelmed by how much there is because I have this curious brain that just won't stop. So sometimes I do have to slow myself down and think, what's just one task that I can complete that's in front of me right now? And so there's always that aspect too. So thank you so much for joining. If you found this live stream helpful, you can feel free to like it. And I think most of you here today are probably subscribed already, but you can always do that to just let other people know what's happening here. I can't wait to interview more composers coming up as we finish the year at Motif Music Studios. My administrative tasks get heavier, and I noticed I was avoiding some of those important emails. So that's why I've been doing less interviews lately because it takes a lot of prep time for that. But I'm eager to get back into those interviews as well. And it's just been such an honor to have each of you here today. Michelle says, yes, courses too. Great points, Amy. Please let us know how you enjoy Bradley Sowash's course. Yeah, I've been following his stuff and I love to improvise. And so I thought that would be something Nice. Oh, thanks again, James. Really appreciate it. And we'll have to chat about an interview some point too, because I know I've got you on my list. So that's super fabulous. Well, thank you to everyone for coming and hanging out. This is a longer live stream, but it felt really fun to just hopefully chat about things that will get you pondering and help you hone the things that you're doing in your own music studio. Or even, James, like if you're working along college students, sometimes these conversations spark things that you can use, hopefully. And I know our big mantra at Motif is that we're teaching and being taught. So I just want to acknowledge that I feel super humbled to be here learning from each of you as well. So thanks so much. You can reach out anytime. My email is motifmusicstudios@gmail.com. So if you have any follow-up questions, you can let me know. So thanks again, and we'll see you next time.